Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Learning and Mending, Tending the Commons. I'm Jen, and I'm going to start off this evening while we wait for everybody to join in and settle in. I'm going to start out with this week's Embroidery of the Week, and this is from Patricia Watts, and it is the Nematoid and Friends. And I just love the detail that she did inside here, these little tiny dots. I mean, they are
Wow.
absolutely perfect. I've tried to do something like this and it does not come out. So this is truly a talented piece here. Um, so I am going to now take this time to share with you what I'm working on tonight. I'm zooming in from Studio City. I use she, her pronouns. Again, my name is Jen, and I am working on the yellow rumped warbler. I finally made it inside the bird, guys. I'm on a roll. I am there. The thing is
Nice.
gonna take
Looks
off
good.
from here.
Nice. Nice job, Jen.
Thank you.
Looking
I'm very
good.
excited. And anybody else that's worked on the bird, I've noticed throughout this series, we all start the leaves and work our way in. And I don't know why, but that's how it's worked out. And here I am. I'm inside now. So I'm going to now pass it on to Izzy.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name's Izzy. My pronouns are they, she, and I'm calling in from Mexico City. And tonight I won't be working on any embroidery because I forgot it, but I will be, I think, just listening and writing down words that stick out and then maybe drawing, sketching, because it's a really illustrative text. And I will pass it to Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm calling in from West Covina. And tonight I'm starting a new embroidery, which is the Raven. And yeah, I look forward to our evening tonight. I will pass it to Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate and I'm calling from Pasadena, and tonight I'm working on the white sage and I'm finishing up my first leaf. And I'll pass it along to Ansu.
Hi, everyone. I am on the road actually. So I'm calling in from the road in Eagle Rock, and I use she, her pronouns. When I get home, I will be working on my embroidery, and I'm just again thrilled to be joining the group session tonight. So, do you mind, Jen, passing it to somebody else because I want to keep my eye on the road?
Yes, of course. That's a good plan. I will pass it to Arlene.
Hi, Jen. Hi, everyone. And let's see, who was it? Like Kate, I am working on the white sage leaf. And so this is how far I am.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I started this last year. So I've been an intermittent participant, but I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm very, very interested in the subject matter and the reading material. So thank you for that. And is there anyone who's not yet been tagged? Okay, Emily, how about you, please?
Sure, thanks, Arlene. Hi, Emily here in Echo Park. She, her pronouns. I'm here with my interspecies friends, Bucky and Lulu. They're going to be listening to the reading, and I'll be contributing some sound meditations here tonight, and happy to be with you all. And let me call upon my friend Lauren.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren, she, they pronouns, calling in from Chicago. I'm happy to be with you tonight and pass it on to Olan.
Hello, Olan, she, her pronouns in West Hollywood, closing in on the rhizome or whatever it is. It's almost filled in.
Wow.
Count those stitches.
We'll get your next.
That is amazing.
Wow.
We'll get your next pattern ready.
That's wild, Olan. I love it.
That should be framed.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to show my thing.
Oh,
see it.
nice.
Wow. Oh my
Beautiful.
gosh. It's amazing.
It's like a painting. I love it.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, Olan.
Okay, I'll pass it on to James. Oliver.
Hi, everybody. This is James. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm calling in from LA, and I will be just doing some garden work in my garden while listening tonight. I really don't know who has gone and who hasn't. Kavi, have you gone?
Oh, I'll take it. Thanks, James. Kavilal, calling in from Sacramento. Pronouns are he, him, they, and I'll be sharing the screen tonight for the readings. Really looking forward to our discussion. And I'll pass it over to Derainer.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Derainer Holland. I'm calling in from Baldwin Hills. I go by she, her pronoun. And tonight I will be working on marigolds. This is one that I just finished like 5 minutes ago. I'm going to be working on a smaller one. Excited to be here tonight and listen in on the readings. And I will pass it on to Cascade.
Thanks, Dee. That's beautiful. Hi, all. Cascade calling in from Jefferson Park, California, Los Angeles, Tongva land, Gabrielino. She, her pronouns. I just put a crib together and I don't know where my embroidery is, but I did the crib. So I'm pretty pumped about that. And just happy to be here and see you all. I will pass it to, let's see, Kaz. Or
oh, it's Kaz. Hey.
Oh, Kaz, sorry.
I'm driving, so it took me a little while to click over. So hi, Kaz. I'm driving through the Coachella Valley right now. She, her pronouns. I'm hoping to get back to my home in time to pick up my embroidery, but I'm really excited that I can join you while I'm en route. And I really can't see anyone else to pass it to.
I will take it at this point. In this series, Tending the Commons, we will be exploring how the commons can be an alternative approach to the destructive nature of capitalism, where individual and short-term gains have been prioritized over the common and long-term good. We'll be asking questions like, what are the commons and what does this look like? How do social relations shift within the commons? In what ways do the commons resist the simulated scarcity of capitalism? This is the 6th iteration of Learning and Mending, following syllabi on abolitionist writing, indigenous perspectives of land stewardship, suffocation, Anna Tsing's The Mushroom at the End of the World, and systems thinking. In many ways, this series is a continuation of what preceded it. We have examined alternatives to capitalism and its destructive, corrosive nature in the previous syllabi. But in this series, we are specifically looking at the alternative to capitalism, that is the commons. Many of you have received embroidery kits from us of native plants, birds, and microscopic organisms that Metabolic Studio is currently cultivating on its project sites. Taken as a collection, all of the embroideries will collectively illustrate biogeoconosis, which describes the intimate association between living things and the physical environment. If you've not received an embroidery kit or are coming close to finishing yours now and you'd like another one, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org, and Cindy will put that into the chat bar now. Tonight, we will share our screen, and we encourage you to read a section of the text aloud with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. Silence is golden, and there is no pressure to fill the transitional space while we enjoy a breath and continue crafting. Feel free to jump in and continue reading at your comfort level. You don't have to read, it's also fine to enjoy listening. And now I will pass it over to Izzy.
Thanks, Jen. So before we begin the reading tonight, we will start with a little guided breath work. And tonight, one of the chapters we're reading opens up with the phrase, "We are all lichens." And a lichen is basically actually two organisms functioning as a single stable unit. Lichens comprise a fungus living in a symbiotic relationship with algae or cyanobacteria, and in some instances, both. And lichen actually covers 7% of the earth, which is really crazy when you think about scale, that something that's seemingly so small can cover something that's actually to us quite large. Is pretty incredible. And it kind of brings up some questions of borders along the lines of questions we were asking last week. When does one species end and another begin? So tonight in our meditation, I will be reading a poem by Pablo Neruda about lichens as we read. So if you're not driving like Kaz and Ansu, I invite you to close your eyes and find yourself in a comfortable position. And as you take a deep in breath, just recognize all the multiplicity of scales happening inside and around you, from your cells to the atmosphere that you breathe in. Deep breaths or shallow breaths, the sky above you, all of these things connected. Take another deep inhale and exhale. And as I read, feel free to just listen gently to your breath. Lichen on stone, the web of green rubber weaves an old hieroglyphic, unfolding the script of the sea on the curve of a boulder. The sun reads it. The mollusk devours it. Fish slither on a stone with a bristling of hackles. An alphabet moves in silence, printing its drowned incunabula on the naked flank of the beaches. The lichens climb higher, plating and braiding, piling their nap in the caverns of ocean and air, coming and going, until nothing may dance but the wave and nothing persist but the wind. Take a deep inhale. Let your shoulders melt down as you exhale away from your ears. Relax the jaw, soften the mouth. Inhale once more. And exhale, release. When you're ready, open back up your eyes. I can't tell if my Zoom screen is frozen, but I'm going to now move on to the next portion of the intro. So just quickly about this text, we will be reading Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Cthulhu by Donna Haraway. Donna Haraway is a professor at UCSC in the History of Consciousness department. And Haraway studied both zoology and biology in her graduate and for her PhD. So her writing really weaves together this commitment she has to science, as well as her desire to disrupt boundaries, shake up assumed knowledge, and as the title of the book suggests, stay with the trouble. So Haraway is a close colleague of Anna Tsing. If you read Mushroom at the End of the World with us, Anna Tsing is the author of that. And Tsing and Haraway often write together. They're collaborators. They write about each other's work and teach in the same department at Santa Cruz. So you might notice a similar thread between the two. That's because they're basically coming out of the same school of thought. And within this text, Haraway sits between, or within this series, Haraway sits between two texts that engage with her ideas. So last week in Boyana Pisker's text about collective life of the forest, we talked briefly about Haraway's notion of making kin with the more than human world. And next week, we'll be reading a text that builds on Haraway's theory of thinking with, to include a discourse of thinking with care, where that author will eventually lead us to thinking with care with soil, how we might think with the soil carefully. So the text we're reading tonight, Staying with the Trouble, is quite honestly a very weird, strange book. It doesn't really fit within a single genre. It moves between biology and ecology and anthropology and sci-fi and poetry and philosophy, storytelling, and so on. In some ways, I see the fluidity of this text as a resistance to conceptual enclosure. But full disclaimer, this text is not it can be frustrating. I've tried reading parts of it multiple times and just been like, what is she saying? What I get more from this text than concrete understanding is just a thoughtful journey through an unknown terrain. So Haraway's language invites you into kind of an unknown, different space of kind of like remarkable chaos and rhythm and poetry. And she talks a lot about humus. So the end result, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but the end result of the decompositional process as a vessel to speak about other things. So in many ways, I read this text as if it's a compost pile where it's just sensory overload. Like sometimes it smells different at every stage. Like sometimes it smells like really good wet soil, and sometimes it smells like a weird fart. And you don't really know if what you're looking at, it's really hard to decipher. So it's in flux, it's enriching. So yeah, tonight, I will be suspending my disbelief, invite others to join me in that. And I will again place the glossary in the chat that defines the key concepts from the text. There are a few terms that are really specific that she uses that we'll talk about in the discussion. And yeah, I will now pass it over to Kavi for a screen share.
Thanks, Izzy. Let me get this up here. We'll be reading 4 pages from the introduction and then moving into a selection from chapter 2 from the book here. And let's start us off here. Introduction. Trouble is an interesting word. It derives from the 13th century French word or French verb meaning to stir up, to make cloudy, to disturb. We, all of us on Terra, live in disturbing times, mixed up times, troubling and turbid times. The task is to become capable with each other in all of our bunctuous kinds of response. Mixed up times are overflowing with both pain and joy, with vastly unjust patterns of pain and joy, with unnecessary killing of ongoingness, but also with the necessary resurgence. The task is to make kin in lines of inventive connection as a practice of learning to live and die well with each other in the thick present. Our task is to make trouble, to stir up potent responses to devastating events, as well as to settle troubled waters and rebuild quiet places. In urgent times, many of us are tempted to address trouble in terms of making an imagined future space, of stopping something from happening that looms in the future, of clearing away the present and the past in order to make futures for coming generations. Staying with the trouble does not require such a relationship to times called the future. In fact, Staying with the trouble requires learning to be truly present, not as a vanishing pivot between awful and endemic pasts and apocalyptic or salvific futures, but as mortal critters entwined in myriad unfinished configurations of places, times, matters, and meanings.
Cthulhucene, is that the way you say it? Is a simple word. It is a compound of two Greek roots, chthon and kainos, that together name a kind of time place for learning to stay with the trouble of living and dying in response ability on a damaged earth. Kainos means now, a time of beginnings, a time for ongoing, for freshness. Nothing in kainos must mean conventional past, presents, or futures. There is nothing in times of beginnings that insists on wiping out what has come before, or indeed wiping out what comes after. Kainos can be full of inheritances, of remembering, and full of comings, of nurturing what might still be. I hear kainos in the sense of thick, ongoing presence with hyphae infusing all sorts of temporalities and materialities. Chthonic ones are beings of the earth, both ancient and up to the minute. I imagine chthonic ones as replete with tentacles, feelers, digots, cords, whiptails, spider legs, and very unruly hair. Chthonic ones romp in multi-critter humus, but have no truck with sky-gazing homo. Chthonic ones are monsters in the best sense. They demonstrate and perform the material meaningfulness of earth processes and critters. They also demonstrate and perform consequences. Chthonic ones are not safe. They have no truck with ideologues. They belong to no one. They writhe and luxuriate in manifold forms and manifold names in all the airs, waters, and places of earth. They make and unmake. They are made and unmade. They are who they are. They are who are. No wonder the world's great monotheisms in both religious and secular guises have tried again and again to exterminate the chthonic, sorry, there's a bubble, again to exterminate the chthonic ones. The scandals of times called the Anthropocene and the Capitalocene are the latest and most dangerous of these exterminating forces. Living with and dying with each other potently in the Cthulhucene can be a fierce reply to the dictates of both Anthropos and Capital.
Kin is a wild category that all sorts of people do their best to domesticate, making kin as oddkin rather than, or at least in addition to, godkin and genealogical and biogenetic family troubles, important matters, like to whom one is actually responsible, who lives and who dies, and how, in this kinship rather than that one. What shape is this kinship? Where and whom do its lines connect and disconnect? And so what? What must be cut and what must be tied if multi-species flourishing on Earth, including human and other than human beings in kinship, are to have a chance? An ubiquitous figure in this book is science fiction, speculative fabulation, string figures, speculative feminism, science fact so far. This reiterated list whirls and loops throughout the coming pages in words and in visual pictures, braiding me and my readers into beings and patterns at stake. Science fiction and speculative fabulation need each other, and both need speculative feminism. I think that SF and string figures in a triple sense of figuring. First, promiscuously plucking out fibers in clotted and dense events and practices. I try to follow the threads where they lead in order to track them and find their tangles and patterns crucial for staying with the trouble in real and particular places and times. In that sense, SF is a method of tracing, of following a thread in the dark, in a dangerous true tale of adventure, where who lives and who dies, and how might become clearer for the cultivating multi-species justice. Second, the string figure is not the tracking, but rather the actual thing, the pattern and assembly that solicits response, the thing that is not oneself, but with which one must go on. Third, string figuring is passing on and receiving, making and unmaking, picking up threads and dropping them. SF is a practice and process. It is becoming with each other in surprising relays. It is a figure for ongoingness in the Cluthaline scene.
The book and the idea of staying with the trouble are especially impatient with two responses that I hear all too frequently to the horrors of the Anthropocene and Capitalocene. This first is easy to describe and I think dismiss, namely a comic faith in techno-fixes, whether secular or religious. Technology will somehow come to the rescue of its naughty but very clever children. Or what amounts to the same thing, God will come to the rescue of his disobedient but ever hopeful children. In the face of such touching silliness about techno-fixes or techno-apocalypses, sometimes it is hard to remember that it remains important to embrace situated technical projects and their people. They are not the enemy. They can do many important things for staying with the trouble and for making generative oddkin. The second response, harder to dismiss, is probably even more destructive, namely, a position that the game is over. It's too late. There's no sense trying to make anything better, or at least no sense having any active trust in each other and working and playing for a resurgent world. Some scientists I know express this kind of bitter cynicism, even as they actually work very hard to make a positive difference for both people and other critters. Some people who describe themselves as critical cultural theorists or political progressives express these ideas too. I think the odd coupling of actually working and playing for multi-species flourishing with tenacious energy and skill, while expressing an explicit game over attitude that can and does discourage others, including students, is facilitated by various kinds of futurism. One kind seems to imagine that only if things work do they matter, or worse, only if what I and my fellow experts do works to fix things does anything matter. More generously, sometimes scientists and others who think read, study, articulate, and care know too much, and it's too heavy. Or at least we think we know enough to reach the conclusion that life on Earth that includes human people in any tolerable way is really over, that the apocalypse is really nigh.
That attitude makes a great deal of sense in the midst of the Earth's sixth great extinction event, and in the midst of engulfing wars, extractions, and immiserations of billions of people and other critters for something called profit or power, or for that matter, called God. A game over attitude imposes itself in the gale force winds of feeling, not just knowing that human numbers are almost certain to reach more than 11 billion people by 2100. This figure represents a 9 billion person increase over 150 years, from 1950 to 2100, with vastly unequal consequences for the poor and the rich. Not to mention vastly unequal burdens imposed on the earth by the rich compared to the poor, and even worse consequences for non-humans almost everywhere. There are many other examples of dire realities. The great accelerations of the post-World War II era gouge their marks in Earth's rocks, waters, airs, and critters. There is a fine line between acknowledging the extent and seriousness of the troubles and succumbing to abstract futurism and its effects of sublime despair and its politics of sublime indifference. This book argues and tries to perform that eschewing futurism, staying with the trouble, is both more serious and more lively. Staying with the trouble requires making oddkin. That is, we require each other in unexpected collaborations and combinations, in hot compost piles. We become with each other or not at all. That kind of material semiotics is always situated, someplace and not no place, entangled and worldly. Alone in our separate kinds of expertise and experience, we know both too much and too little, and so we succumb to despair or to hope, and neither is a sensible attitude. Neither despair nor hope is tuned to the senses, to mindful matter, to material semiotics, to mortal earthlings in thick co-presence. Neither hope nor despair knows how to teach us to play string figures with companion species, the title of the first chapter of this book. 3 long chapters open staying with the trouble.
So we're actually...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's just where we ended for this section of the text.
Oh, good. Thanks, though.
Thank you, though.
It's quite a cadence to fall into.
Yeah, it is. It has a rhythm to it.
Tentacular thinking, Anthropocene, Capitalocene, Cthulhucene. Am I saying that right, Izzy?
Yeah, Cthulhucene. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
We are all lichens. Scott Gilbert, we are all lichens now. Think we must think. Stingers and desperate women who make a fuss. What happens when human exceptionalism and bounded individualism, those old saws of Western philosophy and political economics, become unthinkable in the best sciences, whether natural or social? Seriously unthinkable, not available to think with. Biological sciences have been especially potent in fermenting notions about all the mortal inhabitants of the earth since the imperializing 18th century. Homo sapiens, the human as species, the anthropos as the human species, modern man, was a chief product of these knowledge practices. What happens when the best biologies of the 21st century cannot do their job with bounded individuals plus context, when organisms plus environments or genes plus whatever they need no longer sustain the overflowing richness of biological knowledges, if they ever did? What happens when organisms plus environments can hardly be remembered for the same reasons that even Western indebted people can no longer figure themselves as individuals and societies of individuals in human-only histories? So, surely such a transformative time on Earth must not be named the Anthropocene. In this chapter, with all the unfaithful offspring of the sky gods, with my littermates who find a rich wallow in multi-species muddles, I want to make a critical and joyful fuss about these matters. I want to stay with the trouble, and the only way I know to do that is in generative joy, terror, and collective thinking. My first demon familiar in this task will be a spider, Pimoa Tulu, who lives under stumps in the redwood forests of Sonoma and Mendocino counties near where I live in North Central California. Nobody lives everywhere, everybody lives somewhere. Nothing is connected to everything, and everything is connected to something. This spider is in place, has a place, and yet is named for intriguing travels elsewhere. This spider will help me with returns and with roots and roots. The eight-legged tentacular arachnid that I appeal to gets her generic name from the language of the Goshute people of Utah, and her specific name from denizens of the depth, from the abyssal and elemental entities called chthonic.
The chthonic powers of Terra infuse its tissues everywhere, despite the civilizing efforts of the agents of sky gods to astralize them and set up chief singletons and their tame committee of multiples or sub-gods, the one and the many, making a small change in the biologist's taxonomic spelling from Thulu to Cthulhu and renamed Pimoa Cthulhu. I propose a name for an elsewhere and elsewhen that was, still is, and might yet be the Thulacine. I remember that tentacle comes from the Latin tentaculum, meaning feeler, and tentare, meaning to feel and to try. And I know that my leggy spider has many armed allies. Myriad tentacles will be needed to tell the story of that Thulucine. The tentacular ones tangle me in SF, San Francisco, SF.
SF.
Their many appendages make string figures. They entwine me in the poesis, the making of speculative fabulation, science fiction, science fact, speculative feminism, soin de ficelle so far. The tentacular ones make attachments and detachments. They ache, cuts, and knots. They make a difference They weave paths and consequences, but not determinisms. They are both open and knotted in some ways and not others. SF is storytelling and fact-telling. It is the patterning of possible worlds and possible times, material semiotic worlds, gone, here, and yet to come. I work with string figures as a theoretical trope, a way to think with a host of companions in sympoetic threading, felting, tangling, tracking, and sorting. I work with and in SF as material semiotic composting, a theory in the mud as muddle. The tentacular are not disembodied figures. They are cnidarians, spiders, fingery beings like humans and raccoons, squid, jellyfish, neural extravaganzas, fibrous entities, flagellated beings, myofibral braids, matted and felted microbial and fungal tangles, probing creepers, swelling roots, reaching and climbing tendrilled ones. The tentacular are also nets and networks, IT critters in and out of clouds. Tentacularity is about life lived along lines, and such a wealth of lines, not at points, not in spheres. The inhabitants of the world, creatures of all kinds, human and non-human, are wayfarers. Generations are like a series of interlaced trails, string figures all.
All of the tentacular, stringy ones have made me unhappy with post-humanism, even as I have nourished by much generative work done under that sign. My partner, Rustin Hognes, suggested compost instead of posthumanism, as well as humanistes instead of humanities. And I jumped into the wormy pile. Human as humus has potential. If we could chop and shred human as homo, the dehumanizing project of a self-making and plant-destroying CEO. Imagine a conference not on the future of humanities in the capitalist restructuring university, but instead on the power of humanistes for a habitable multi-species muddle. Ecosexual artist Beth Stevens and Annie Sprinkle made a bumper sticker for me, for us, for SF. Composting is so hot.
The earth of the ongoing Thulacene is sympoetic, not autopoetic. Mortal worlds, Terra, Earth, Gaia, Thulu, the myriad names and powers that are not Greek, Latin, or Indo-European at all, do not make themselves, no matter how complex and multi-leveled the systems, no matter how much older or how much order out of disorder might be produced in generative autopoietic system breakdowns and relaunchings at higher levels of order. Autopoietic systems are hugely interesting. Witness the history of cybernetics and information sciences, but they are not good models for living and dying worlds and their critters. Autopoietic systems are not closed, spherical, deterministic, or teleological, but they are quite good enough models for the mortal SF world. Poiesis is symphotic, sympoetic, always partnered all the way down, with no starting and subsequently interacting units. The thylacine does not close in on itself. It does not round off. Its contact zones are ubiquitous and can continuously spin out loopy tendrils. Spider is a much better figure for symbiosis than any inadequately leggy vertebrate of whatever pantheon. Tentacularity is sympathonic, wound with abysmal and dreadful graspings, frayings, and weavings, passing relays again and again in generative recursions that make up living and dying. After I use the term symbiosis in a grasp for something other than the lures of autopoiesis, Katie King told me about M. Beth Dempster's Master of Environmental Studies thesis written in 1998, in which he suggested the term symbiosis for collectively producing systems that do not have self-defined spatial or temporal boundaries. Information and control are distributed among components. The system for evolutionary and how the systems are evolutionary and have the potential for surprising change. By contrast, autopoietic systems are self-producing autonomous units with self-defined spatial or temporal boundaries that tend to be centrally controlled, homeostatic, and predictable. Dempster argued that many systems are mistaken for autopoietic that are really symbiotic. I think the point is important for thinking about rehabilitation, making livable again, and sustainability amid the porous tissues and open edges of damaged but still ongoing living worlds, like the planet Earth and its denizens in current times being called the Anthropocene. If it is true that neither biology or philosophy neither biology nor philosophy can any longer supports the notion of independent organisms in environments, that is, interacting units plus context / rules, then symbiosis is the name of the game in spades. Bounded or neoliberal individualism amended by autopoiesis is not good enough figuratively or scientifically. It misleads us down deadly paths. Barad's and genital realism and interaction become common sense and perhaps a lifeline for Terra wayfarers.
SF, string figuring, is sympoetic. Thinking with my work on Cat's Cradle, as well as the work of another of her companions in thinking, Felix Guattari, Isabel Stengers relayed back to me how players pass back and forth to each other the patterns at stake, sometimes conserving, sometimes proposing and inventing. More precisely, commenting, if it means thinking with, that is, becoming with is in itself a way of relating. But knowing that what you take has been held out entails a particular thinking between. It does not demand fidelity, still less fealty, rather a particular kind of loyalty, the answer to the trust of the held out hand. Even if this trust is not in you, but in creative uncertainty, even if the consequences and meaning of what has been done, thought, or written do not belong to you anymore, then they belong to the one you take the relay from. One way or another, the relay is now in your hands, together with the demand that you do not proceed with mechanical confidence. in cat's cradling at least. 2 pairs of hands are needed, and in each successive step, one is passive, offering the result of its previous operation, a string entanglement, for the other to operate only to become active again at the next step when the other presents the new entanglement. But it can also be said that each time the passive pair is the one that holds and is held by the entanglement, only to let it go when the other one takes the relay.
In passion and action, detachment and attachment, this is what I call cultivating responsibility. That is also collective knowing and doing, an ecology of practices, whether we ask for it or not. The pattern is in our hands. The answer to the trust of the held out hand, think we must. Marilyn Strathern is an ethnographer of thinking practices. She defines anthropology as studying relations with relations, a hugely consequential mind and body altering sort of commitment. Nourished by her lifelong work in Highland, Papua New Guinea, Mount Hagen. Strathern writes about accepting the risk of relentless contingency, of putting relations at risk with other relations from unexpected worlds, embodying the practice of feminist speculative fabulation in the scholarly mode. Strathern taught us, a simple but game-changing thing. It matters what ideas we use to think other ideas. I compost my soul in this hot pile. The worms are not human. They're undulating bodies in ingest and reach, and their feces fertilize worlds. Their tentacles make string figures.
It matters what thoughts think thoughts. It matters what knowledges know knowledges. It matters what relations relate relations. It matters what worlds worlds. It matters what stories tell stories. Paintings by Bila Goldenthal are eloquent testimony to this mattering. What is it to surrender the capacity to think? These times called the Anthropocene are times of multi-species, including human urgency, of great mass death and extinction, of onrushing disasters whose unpredictable specificities are foolishly taken as unknowability itself, of refusing to know and to cultivate the capacity of responsibility, of refusing to be present in and to onrushing catastrophe in time, of unprecedented looking away. Surely to say unprecedented in view of the realities of the last centuries is to say something almost unimaginable. How can we think in times of urgencies without the self-indulgent and self-fulfilling myths of apocalypse, when every fiber of our being is interlaced, even complicit in the webs of processes that must somehow be engaged and repatterned? Recursively, whether we asked for it or not, the pattern is in our hands, the answer to the trust of the held out hand. Think we must. Instructed by Valerie Hartouni.
Sorry to interrupt you again.
Okay.
That's where it ends. Best for last each time, Cascade. Thank you.
It's our dance. Thank you, Izzy.
So before moving into the next section, I wanted to take a little bit of time to untangled a little bit of the text and really kind of dive in to digest it a little bit more. So I wanted to talk today about spider season, or Arachtober, which is not just the Halloween season, but like spider season being the autumn time that we start noticing spiders in our homes. It's actually the mating season for the spiders, and they seek the warmth and damp places to hide out, as well as to mate and really spin their webs to attract, or some certain species spin their webs to attract mates as well. It's kind of a reminder that even as we try to fill every like nook and cranny of our houses, we can't isolate ourselves from the outside. Even within our homes, we may seem like we're in a closed off environment, but it's actually, it still is part of the outside. It's still part of that symbiotic system. And so in kind of transitioning to Donna Haraway's analogy about the Pimoa Cthulhu spider as a way to understand string figures and explore the Cthulhu scene concept, I'm going to try to attempt to kind of guide you through my interpretation of the text as well. And so I think it's kind of clear that the author is the way that Haraway is speaking about the spider's web in its entirety is what we see. And the way we understand it is to be kind of a visual for the symbiotic system. So to quote from the text, when Haraway is mentioning in the introduction, an SF method of tracing, of following a thread in the dark, where who lives and dies and how might become clear for the cultivating of multi-species justice, not the tracking, but the pattern. The whole assembly itself solicits response, picking up the threads and dropping them, becoming with each other in surprising ways. And I think kind of following an analogy, I think Haraway is mentioning that spiders themselves are making the string figures, and we would kind of look at it from a larger macro view that the web itself is this symbiotic system itself. And to kind of go into the text again, the tentacular ones make attachments and detachments. They weave paths and consequences, but not determinisms. I took it to say, kind of thinking about more the spiders, the web, the web that they lay themselves, kind of laid out in a tangled net that has potential consequences for insects and creatures that might get caught in them. But the web itself does not guarantee it. It's like the web, just having the web laid out doesn't guarantee to have, catching your prey or attracting a mate in that matter. And itself, that even the web that's waiting to be laid within the spiders, and the potential as it's weaved, and the lasting web still remains as the spider's gone. Even as kind of all, spider webs are really unfinished. Some spiders go back, create, remove, constantly work on it. And as the author says, the thulacine does not close in on itself. It does not round off. Its contact zones are ubiquitous and constantly spinning out loopy dendrils that spiders might someday kind of pick up their webs, or even take over other spiders' webs. They kind of relay between different spiders. They're kind of picking up another part of that balance of kind of, the ownership kind of goes from one to the other as the other is kind of passing it on and taking it well. And so I think kind of you could draw that analogy to just see human beings themselves as Haraway kind of mentioned, that humans are also string figures, that we are kind of potentially taking over spaces occupied by non-humans and passing that relays of living and death, the kind of generative processes that come from that. And following that kind of the threads and relays, Haraway is talking about the SF, or string figure, or the other many meanings of SF, as storytelling and fact-telling. It is the patterning of possible worlds and possible times, materials, semiotic worlds, gone, here, and yet to come. And kind of digesting a little bit about this, about autopoiesis, when we learned from the last reading of the Web of Life in Fritjof Capra's reading, and kind of taking into the meaning that the symbiotic system is really, generally a kind of completely opposite of that way of thinking, that, one has the autopoiesis systems has clear boundaries of web and is self-contained and able to kind of maintain that homeostatic balance in really predictable ways, or being able to adapt to it too, and flexing to based on what that web of system kind of knows, and that symbiotic systems have no starting and ending point, and partners all the way down. That in the kind of the end, the words of M. Beth Dempster, collectively and producing systems that do not have self-defined or spatial or temporal boundaries. The systems are evolutionary and have the potential for surprising change. Kind of string figuring is symbiotic, and the spiders themselves as a symbiotic system that has no starting points, no spatial temporal boundaries, can be picked up and kind of worked on itself as well. And other spiders kind of playing in this kind of game in a way of taking ownership, and then it kind of passes down as well. And what I kind of took away from this was the author kind of arguing that in about thinking about the Thylacine, we really have to think in deep time, that even as humans, we're tentacle ones kind of laying out string figures. And even with the use of the word kind of the Thylacine, referring to the chthonic, meaning the underworld, and chthon, the Greek word for one of the several words for earth, and kainos kind of meaning for new and time beginnings. I think, kind of reading into it a little bit more in my own kind of interpretation, I think it's, thinking more about the, not just mourning for the Earth's destruction caused by anthropogenic climate change, but working within the symbiotic system to make odd kin and also have a sense of wonder for what's to come, even after our lifetimes, or even our, even as individuals or species, what's to come in our future, to kind of thinking about without time, after we disappear from the earth, and other critters and creatures kind of take over as well. And lastly, kind of ending off with one of the quotes that really struck with me, that making odd kin require each other in unexpected collaborations and combinations in hot compost piles. We become with each other or not at all. And it was a kind of a tough text to grapple with, and really a tongue twister at sometimes too. But I think it was really, a lot of the ideas were in conversation with systems view of life, but also offering a completely different way of thinking about systems as well, and encompassing the entire web and looking at it that way. And then, yeah, so I'll pass it over to Izzy.
Thanks, Kavi. So tonight we're going to be closing after the discussion with Emily's tonal sonic soundscapes. So last week we did it after the reading, just letting everyone know that's why we're going right into discussion. And Kavi, thank you so much. That was an incredible deep dive. I'm very impressed by how you just wrapped that all together. I'll read out some questions for tonight that are kind of reflective of some of the things that you were saying. So firstly, what does making kin mean to you? And how might making kin be an important concept for understanding the commons? And is tentacular thinking consciously within a web of relations, more reflective of commoning as opposed to, say, linear thought? What is the power of storytelling in this framework? And what does staying with the trouble mean to you? So I will drop those questions in the chat. And again, the glossary is in the chat. I dropped it in there, and I know Cindy did too. So there's some terms I put in the chat as well. But if you just want to take a look at the glossary and raise any questions about that, we invite you to do so too. So I'll drop those questions. Thanks, guys.
On the first question, first of all, Izzy, these are, again, really insightful questions, and they help sort of focus the mind on what you glean from the text. So thank you for that. But on the issue of making kin, I mean, what I got from the text was this breakdown from that sort of post-Reformation, Newton, you know, Bacon, their sort of linear mind games that they played that laid down these tracks for whole systems of thought. She's really just like unpeeling that sort of peeling it back, and making kin is coming back to you know, an earlier way of thinking where we really understood our place in the world in a different way than that sort of post-Reformation Enlightenment period science just kind of shot us on this track, and it has had such massive consequences for the world. But I wonder, you know, what made me, this word kin is the same as almost relatives. And I hear relatives a lot in the Indigenous context. And I just wonder, where was she coming from with that? Like, was that a separate word that she felt stood apart from relatives? So she didn't want to use the Indigenous people, North American Indigenous people's traditional thinking, and she wanted to create her own path into this world of understanding our being as not sort of this atomistic individual set. You know, we're not on planet Mars, we're on planet Earth, and that's the only difference, versus the thinking about us as a continuum of sort of bacteria and life forms on this Earth. But I just wonder why she needed to construct kin instead of using relatives, which is more familiar to many of us.
Yeah, that is a really good point and question. And I haven't looked into why she chooses to use kin instead of the word relatives. And that will be my next pursuit. I'm going to scour the text for that. And if I find it, I will let you know. I'm really curious about that.
There's something immediate about the word kin rather than a relative that there's history with. There's that sense of feeling a kinship with something that maybe she's looking at opening up an immediacy of connection.
I also think about how the word kin is in a lot of the words she's using. So make king, think king. Yeah, those two come to mind immediately. I'm sure there are a few more, but she does play with language a lot. And so I wonder, like, if you say we make kin, and how that sounds like making and making with, it's just a lot of poetic wordplay, which is something that I really value about this text, but also does make it a bit of a tongue twister. It's kind of crazy.
The architecture of her language, though, is really helpful to break out of that linear mode of thinking and to go into more of a sensuous sort of liminal understanding of the world. So she's almost, as you said, a poetically painting this new world in the use of her words. So that's a good observation about Kim.
I came across something in the text or around the text that I wanted to share that really resonated for me. One thing was this idea of the thick present and how our present is just, you know, ripe and full with all these aspects and contradictions and just Yeah, that really resonated, the idea of a thick present. And so on a website I found, which I believe she must have put together with some of her colleagues, thickpresent.com, it says, the thick present makes visible the blessings and curses of our interconnectedness and calls us to recognize who we are bound up with and in what ways. And I just felt like that was so provocative. Who we are bound up with and in what ways.
For me, there's a certain alchemy of making kinship with other living systems that are not just human. And it usually surprises me when I form a kinship with a non-living, with a living being that's not a human. But it's happened to me several times in my work with Metabolic Studio. And the most recent time was 2 years ago when we made a surgical incision in the concrete of the LA River and lifted the concrete up and discovered the sand and rock and soil below the concrete, that there was this entire living system under the concrete that had never occurred to me that it existed. And there it was. And now that floodplain feels like kin to me. Like it completely changed my life to find that. It was an unintended consequence of an action that I was able to take, but that floodplain is not conceptual to me, it's family. And I've been going to extraordinary levels to save every little bit of it that I can. So I think that at least for me, and I don't know for other people, but kinship forming has to do with a physical, tactile, embodied relationship with wonder. And that feels different than relationship. And I'm not sure whether she's using that word kin, because for me, there's almost enchantment, like having, like talking about, enchanted creatures in gardens like trolls or something that live in trees, or, there's something about kinship that has a alchemy or a state of wonder to it that can't necessarily just be explained by kind of, this is my relation, although it includes that, of course, kinship and relationality. And I would say, the same was true for me with Not a Cornfield, when we actually grew 32 acres of corn on an industrial site. I felt completely astounded by the chlorophyll revolution, what that much vibrating, pulsing life did to that site. It was like it made a permanent kinship with all the living systems around it, including the human will to manifest a better place. Felt like it got awakened, not by the project, but by the corn itself. The corn did the work, not the conceptual construct of the artwork. And that formed a deep kinship in me to realize that was not, I had no imagination before that I could feel related to corn. I could read it in mythology, but it actually, realizing that work made a kinship real that only made my sense of responsibility to the seed, to all that comes with the seed, real, like in a kin kind of way.
Thank you for sharing that, Lauren. That's really beautiful. And I think that is, to answer one of the questions, the power of storytelling in this framework. the story of the floodplain, the story of your relation to the floodplain, the story of what's in the floodplain, their story, the multiple time scales that coalesce in that. It's really incredible. And I think Haraway does help give a framework to think about these experiences and understand them, although it is the material making with where these kinships are really formed.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said there, Lauren, that coming to know this term kin. And then Izzy, I really appreciate your bookend there talking about storytelling, because I do think that is part of the resonance of certain projects and experiences, is how they're carried through conversation and through stories and through narrative. And I just popped into my mind, I feel like this idea of becoming close with the river over time. I think it's a little over 5 years ago, I started working with Metabolic Studio and Lauren and the team, and it's been a journey of coming to an intimacy with the river, or coming to a kind of kinship with the river, and now to feel the river having a voice, or a voice developing for the river. It makes me think of this idea from the reading last week, the spirit of the trees, the Kodama, and how, you know, it kind of can linger and be with us and carry. And I feel that I've come to feel that around the river, you know, the spirit of the river that we can carry, or the spirit of the forest. And yeah, so it's just interesting to feel this text kind of apply to this complex reality that we find ourselves in, and like kind of the freedom of language and her play with it, allowing for these new frameworks of appreciation to exist. Fascinating.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you noted about this kind of language and what it makes you feel. And to circle back to the point about storytelling and, you know, what Lauren said about her experience, just even the architecture of that story is something to note, because it's not the heroic sort of archetype of a beginning and then a middle and an end, and there's like a moral built into that. It's just Lauren saying, gosh, you know, this unexpected thing happened to me, and you know, it transformed me, and I just became, you know, connected to it. And that's the story. It doesn't have this sort of crisis, and then it doesn't have like a breakthrough. And so I feel like that alternative structure of the story itself is significant, maybe to for us to then individually understand that story, and it's not being sort of didactically told to us as take this moral and, you know, swallow it. So it's in a way, it's weaving a little thread, and we have to sort of find our own filaments to go and meet it and to thread into it. And that itself is important, because we make our own meaning out of that, her story, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Another linguistic through line that just came to mind was, so the title is, part of the title is Staying with the Trouble. And the word trouble, she writes, comes from to stir up, to make cloudy, to disturb, which made me think of disturbance ecology, which we've studied a lot in Learning and Mending series before. And particularly in Anna Singh's text, The Mushroom at the End of the World, the way that something like how disturbance, for instance, when the forest was wiped out in Japan, and in after nuclear war, and the Matsutake arose in the root of, entangled in the roots of pine, and that kind of communal collective relation and web of mycorrhizal tree root connection that was built, that was mutual care and symbiosis out of disturbance. That, I guess, that to me is how I like to think about staying with the trouble, and what I get from that title in part, and not walking away from life because of not walking away from caring for multi-species and making kin with more than human beings because of this daunting threat of apocalypse, but staying with the troubling times to come and creating commons despite and for the ongoingness, I guess.
Right. Isn't that the same part of the text where she says, this concept of hope in the future or despair and sort of ennui about the future, both of them are just artificial constructs. Throw those away and you just have to be in this present. And that's what staying with the trouble is.
Exactly.
Which also circles back to her idea of the thick present, right? It's all, I feel like all of the sort of conceptual threads that you've brought and articulated in your amazing questions, Izzy, are kind of circle around that. I think a real call to action to be present with these extremes, and not just that, but to actually work towards the concept of, like, not just the non-narrative or the non-binary, but in a way, yes, in a way it's like her play with linguistics, her play with structure in the text, and then also with the time, her sort of criticism of time itself as like a binary of future and past, and everything that's applied to that, to the futurisms, to everything that is not the present. It's oddly, like, kind of retroactively really inspiring, and motivating and challenging for sure. But I also think Lauren's sharing her story about Not a Cornfield and that experience, like being willing to be the catalyst of something, being willing to have that intuition to know, to create and to collaborate, and then also allowing for the for a power greater than you, the corn in this instance, and I'm sure many other layers to it. There's a that's also this kind of circles back to that idea of the thick present, of just, that an action that taking action is neither necessarily hope nor despair, but non-action is nothing, essentially. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I really loved this text.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And to think about thick presence, Emily is going to take us now on a sonic journey into the thick present. So I'll pass it over to Emily.
Thanks, everyone. Gonna be playing some strings tonight. Strings that conduct electricity, and thinking about how the body itself conducts electricity. and how we're heat emitters. And so I'm going to also be playing sound through the conduction or sensing of infrared energy.
Thank you so much for that, Emily. That was really beautiful. And thank you everyone for coming and sharing tonight. Next week, we'll be reading a text by an Italian author that talks about Donna Haraway and thinking. And then the following week, we'll be reading another chapter in that text about soil and thinking with soil. And that one's a little bit more materially driven. Next week's kind of laying the foundation to the following week. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night,
Izzy.
all.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Kavi.
Everybody.
Bye, guys.
Have a good day.
Bye. You too.